Right answer.
Yeah.
I like being 64 because it's divisible by 2, and there's a Beatles song. So
I know, you get the Beatles song. That's so exciting.
I've already told him
What's happening?
I've already told him I will still need him and I will still feed him.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
hi, Rainey.
How are you?
Good. When David was 36, we had a combined birthday party with someone who was 64 because we figured they were 100 together. and so the cake had 100 on it.
Oh.
And of course, in those days, we thought that our friend who was 64 was ancient.
I know. But funny how young that is now.
Now we think 64, a piece of cake.
And some days I think 64 is a new 80s.
You all watch it because I'm 78, so you got to be careful with what you say here.
Yeah, really.
Thanks for letting a refugee come and observe you this today.
Well, 78 is the new 55 or something.
Works for us, yeah.
Hey, Mike. Hey, Kim. Oops.
He dropped himself.
All righty.
Hi, David
Well,
Sachs, are you there?
Oh, let me change my name. I'm not St. Paul's RBA.
No,
You are for us, Carter.
Yes.
that's right. Carter, you are.
I thought you were going to change it to Kim Kardashian or something.
Oh, yeah. I like it. I like it.
That's when you stop the video part.
Yeah.
She would liven things up. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. I could see that at St. Paul's.
Oh,
Wow.
Lord.
God loves everyone.
All right. Well, it is past 7 o'clock, so let's get this show on the road. So I think most everybody here knows who I am. I'm Scott Hayes, and I'm the director of music at All Saints. Chris is hanging out there. His video wasn't working, but so he said he'd let me do the. Well, no, it's just he can get his picture up. He just can't get his video up. But at any rate, so I'll do all the talking for right now. But I don't have much talking to do. All I have to do is introduce David and Bill. So. So this is sort of the last in our sort of idea with this music, a joyful noise deal here, and let's see, I'm gonna turn the mute thing on here. There we go. All right, and this was the last of our fourth in our series of A Joyful Noise, and our plan is tentatively to go to monthly, and the time and date of that may change somewhat depending on what's going on, but so that's our plan from here on out. We don't have anybody lined up at this stage, but this has been a lot of fun just to have a program between the two churches and include AGO folks and, just sort of all over the place. So it's been a lot of fun. So at any rate, without further ado, I'd like to introduce David and Bill, who are our speakers tonight. And David and Bill did this presentation for Virginia Seminary Center for Lifelong Learning a few months back. And I thought it would be a great thing for all of us who are musicians and music lovers in the church and in different capacities just to kind of hear this, and because it applies in a lot of different ways. So without further ado, David and Bill.
Hi.
Thank you so much, Scott and Chris, for asking us to do this. We're delighted to spend some time with you. And I think later there will be some opportunity for dialogue and for you to ask questions. And we will refer all the questions, of course, to Chris and Scott. But maybe we'll answer some of them. Let's face it, we are going through difficult times. And a friend of mine wrote today and said that he was trying not to have a pity party. And I wrote back and said, there's a difference between a pity party and just acknowledging that times are tough and that you're suffering. Singing, for those of us who are used to singing in church and used to singing in choir, is more than recreation. It's more than entertainment. It is life-giving. It is soul enriching. It's an enterprise that adds meaning to our lives. And so for it to suddenly disappear makes a huge difference in our lives, doesn't it? It robs us of something that's almost salvific. It's so important to us and so integral to our faith and our sense of well-being.
One of my heroes in the world is Brene Brown, the social worker and researcher. And she's an Episcopalian out of Texas. And she is very incarnational, whether she uses those words or not. And she says there's three reasons that she goes to church still. One is to receive the body and blood of Christ in Eucharist. One is to sing hymns with other people. And the other is to pass the peace with people that she'd probably want to slug on Tuesday. So, and all of those are not with us now. All those incarnational ways that we show up, including hymn singing, including being together to pass the peace and getting Eucharist. So it really does challenge us as we figure out how to be the body of Christ together.
So most of you will know the name Alice Parker if you've ever sung in choirs, the great arranger who we're used to singing her arrangements of spirituals and folk songs and that kind of thing. And she was one of my mentors. And somebody asked Alice Parker, why do we sing? And her answer was, because we have to. Just like the birds have to sing, so do we have to sing. And there is a hymn from the 19th century that some of you may know. And the first line of it is actually, how can I keep from singing? And we might title our talk tonight that, how can I keep from singing? You might be interested to know that this hymn was written during Reconstruction, which was a difficult time of growth in this country's life. And it also was written during a cholera epidemic. So just like we are in the time of COVID, they were in the time of cholera. If you don't know that hymn, you might want to look it up later on your computer, because I think you'll find the words really upbuilding, and I think they'll affirm what you already think. Lots of times that's what great literature does, isn't it? And poetry, it puts into words what we can't quite say, but what we already believe. So the absence of singing, if anything, if there's a gift in this, and I hate to try to say look on the bright side, but if there's a gift in this, it's served to emphasize the importance of singing for us. I had a priest friend years ago, both of us did, in Tucson, Arizona, and she used to say AFOG, which stood for another frigging opportunity for growth. So whenever she was going through something tough and somebody said, oh, well, this is a real growth opportunity, she'd say, oh, sure, AFOG, thanks a lot. Well, this is a big AFOG, isn't it, that we're going through right now. But before the pandemic, I want to suggest that we had the luxury of taking singing for granted. And I'm going to guess that nobody on this webinar tonight, anybody in earshot, is not taking for singing or music in general for granted. Perhaps, in fact, we value it more than we ever have.
And as we reflected on how we wanted to present tonight, wearing my psychotherapist hat, we found it useful to help people kind of talk about the stages of grief. We studied those in college, Kubler-Ross and her associates, but to kind of check in where we are with this grief over loss of choral singing, loss of hymn singing, gathering together to sing together. And just to refresh those stages, the first one is denial. And I think certainly an example of denial in my life was back in March, thinking that I was still all set to do this retreat I was going to do in May. And of course, it was going to be just fine in a couple of months. Talk about denial. And I think we hit denial in all kinds of ways at different times. And it's just good to check in. Are we in denial? And part of my remedy for denial is to say, you know, I'm planning to live like this through next year into the spring. So I couldn't just keep adjusting every month and say, oh my gosh, how do we do this? The next phase is anger. And I think we certainly have felt anger about not getting together, of anger at the virus, anger the way our country is responding to the virus, all kinds of things to be angry about. And then we bargain. God, if you take this virus away, or if you find a vaccine, I will up my pledge, or I will, that's for you, Charlie. I will do whatever it takes to get back right. We do bargaining. And then depression is certainly a part of grief. And I think it's important to recognize the sadness that comes and the healing that comes from singing that then we're not able to do, and missing that gathering together, and the depression that might just be a low level sadness that we feel when we're not getting together to sing. And then acceptance. And I think acceptance with this comes in various phases because it's not over. Our dear brothers and sisters in the Gulf region will find a time when their hurricane damage is over and the flooding is over, and they can begin accepting what's happened, what's around them, what losses have they found, and what do they need to do because it's over. One of the challenges in accepting this is that we don't know when it's going to be over and how will it end and what will that look like. But I think we get small doses of acceptance as we begin making adjustments on our expectations, what we hope for, setting the stage for maybe it's more realistic to plan to live like this through Christmas rather than when I thought it was going to be the 4th of July. And then an additional concept that's been added to the stages of grief is finding meaning. And I think finding meaning in this loss as Christians is profoundly important. And there is much conversation, and we won't get into all of that now, but what is the purpose of this cultural pause that COVID is giving the world? And are we beginning to examine what's important, and how do we live together as one human family, and how do we preserve our earth from annihilation? And those kinds of important questions that may not come up if we're busy and running around and not taking that pause. So I would just encourage you, wherever you are in this, to take kind of an account of yourself, and maybe the stages of grief might be a useful tool to kind of make an assessment now and then where you are in all of this.
I'd like to talk for just a minute to the people who are members of choirs. And if you're not a member of a choir, perhaps you can apply this to some small group that you do belong to. And if you don't belong to a small group, you might think about making that part of your faith journey, because it's something that's tremendously upbuilding. Choirs often become faith communities, small faith communities. We do all the things together that people in faith communities do. We learn together, we worship together, and this may be most important right now. We reach out to each other in need. There is genuine pastoral work that's going on in choirs and in many small groups. Pastoral work is not limited to clergy by any means. Pastoral work is something that all of us can and probably ought to be involved in. But I've observed over the years, I've conducted choirs all throughout my life, and I've observed that as we grew closer and we grew more intimate, and as we grew as a body, there just naturally developed a sense of wanting to care for each other, especially when we knew that people were going through times of particular need. We reached out to them and we looked for ways that we could be supportive and we could be helpful. I'm going to guess that you could think right now of somebody who is in your choir or in your small group that really need you to reach out to them. And I'd like you to consider that and maybe jot those things down as we go along. Let me suggest some ways that we can reach out and help each other. First of all, we can pray with and for people when they present needs to us. We hear those things from each other, don't we? Because people share them naturally in conversation. And there's no reason that we can't just pray together either right then or say to that person sincerely, let me pray for you while you're going through this difficult thing. And I don't want to forget the people who are most affected by COVID, which is to say, people who themselves have been infected or people whose family or close friends have been infected. We're talking mostly about how it affects us as singers and musicians and parishioners who love to sing. But let's remember those people really do need our prayer because there's a great deal of suffering.
And never forget the social aspects of all of our small groups, the choirs, and the way that we care for each other. We have kept in touch with choirs through our whole life in churches. It is people in choirs that we continue to stay in touch with. And those relationships are being built now as we reach out to them. We love Zoom coffee hour at St. Paul's. I'm not sure what All Saints is doing, but we love it. And you might think that the choir is wanting to do musical things, but they also want to get together. And if you have some kind of leadership role in a small group, just to get together for a Zoom coffee hour with your particular choir or small group could be really valuable. And another way to check in to kind of see what's going on with people, because there are so many people who are isolated and alone.
Right. We both sing with the Richmond Symphony Chorus, and we have had periodic meetings where we get together and we try to do some singing. It's kind of comical sometimes because our director has such a great sense of humor, in addition to being a fabulous conductor. And she has us all muted, of course, and we're singing something together. And she'll stop and correct us as if she has heard something we've done wrong. The truth is, she's a good enough choral director that she knows what we're doing wrong, even before she hears any sounds. Another thing that you might consider doing, and several people have done this, and David and I have led some of these, is to do a spiritual retreat online. That way you can be together and you can process some things together without having to be together in person. A lot of people have spiritual directors. David and I are both spiritual directors, and there are a number of people in Richmond and other places that do spiritual direction. A spiritual director is not like a therapist, but it's somebody that you can talk to about your journey and who offers guidance and support for you. Let me also suggest, and I feel kind of righteous about this today because I just got back from swimming my laps, so I feel like I can say this. Some days, no.
I'm a witness. He was there.
Right. Exercise is awfully good for you, and any therapist will tell you that if you're in a time of despondency, exercise can really clean up those synapses in your brain and just put you in a better mood. And then I want to talk a bit about meditation. David and I have each taught meditation in different settings. And meditation is very important. You know, there was a time in this culture when we thought that meditation was something that belonged to Eastern religions and something that was foreign to us. But the fact is, meditation has been in our tradition for thousands of years, going back to Judaism in the Old Testament days. And meditation, I say that meditation is often very different than prayer because meditation involves more listening than talking. Maybe you don't know how to meditate. There's a book that I came across many years ago and that I've used many times called simply How to Meditate by Lawrence Leshan, Leshan. There is a particular chapter in there that I've recommended to my students at Virginia Seminary over the years because it gives various techniques for meditation. There are many ways to meditate, and whatever is right for you is the right thing. This gives many different types, and you can try one. If it doesn't work, try another. so you can get yourself into the habit of meditating.
And one of my favorite expressions that I use a lot with my spiritual directees is that the first language of God is silence, and all the rest is a bad translation. And Thomas Keating made that most famous. And I think it's true that we have so many words and we're bombarded by so many stimulating, shiny objects that we get distracted. And if meditation is difficult for you, then good for you. Jump in. It's been difficult for people through the centuries, and you're not alone. But I think we just really have to draw on spiritual resources and fill up our spiritual well, because we cannot do this on our own steam. And meditation is one way, along with prayer, to keep our spiritual well full, so that we have the energy we need, so we have the resources and direction that we need to do whatever the next right thing is.
The thing that I often tell people in my meditation classes is, if you're the kind of person who does not like to meditate at all, you probably need it more than anyone does. I take those days when I really just hate the idea of sitting time and spending time with just myself and the spirit and listening to God's voice. And it's a little bit like swimming in that there are some days when I can't wait to jump into the water. It just feels so good and exhilarating. And other days when I say, oh no, please, I don't want to go swimming today. It's the last thing in the world I want to do. I'd rather go have a coffee and a nice warm muffin somewhere than swim. In fact, today I did think of that. And those are the days when I need to swim the most. So I would compare that to meditating. It's those times when you're so distant from it, you don't want to do it.
And if you have access to apps like Calm or Headspace, there are all kinds of apps that are available that can help you focus your energies. There are daily readings by Richard Rohr and lots of different people that have daily readings that you can get into their podcasts. Those kinds of things really keep your spirits up when you have difficulty.
What meditation does for us is calms us and centers us and focuses us on things that are the most important in life, and helps to kind of strip away some of the distractions. Sometimes in our lives, our distractions are so compelling that they don't seem like distractions at all. And when you meditate, it just brings things into perspective. And David, I had this quote down in my notes next to, so I'm going to say it again. Silence is the first language of God. All else is a poor translation. We don't know who first said that. Some people think it was Rumi, and some people think it was St. John of God. And certainly Thomas Keating is a modern writer and philosopher, a theologian who has said it a good bit and spread it around in our culture.
I'd like to share too a technique that's been helpful when I talk about noticing where you are and assessing your feelings at the particular moment. And a wonderful teacher in the DC area is a woman named Tara Brach. And she has a methodology called RAIN, which is a way to just self-examine when you're having a particular feeling. And I share that because I think it's a useful thing as we explore how we're going to cope and manage without music. And RAIN stands for, it is recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. So you recognize, am I feeling frightened? Am I feeling sad? Am I scared? And allow it. And that's really an immediate, quick phase to let whatever the so-called negative feelings stay. So you allow it. And then you gently investigate, mostly with your body, not so much kind of a critical mind, but mostly an allowing, questioning, gentle body. Where am I feeling it? What's coming up for me? And just be an investigator that's a gentle, kind investigator. What's going on right now that I'm feeling this feeling? And then nurture, to allow it to be with you and say, of course, it's all right to feel this way, because for God's sake, we're in a pandemic. So you need to feel it, for God's sake. So yes.
It's not a pity party.
Not a pity party. feel it.
Let's get back to our musical needs for just a minute, because that's what's caused us to gather here. How can we meet some of those musical needs? What's the alternative to singing? Well, frankly, there's not one. But we need to look for the things that are next best, because nothing matches singing, either individually or corporately. There's something that happens with singing that happens all the time. Most of you have access to recordings. If you're in my generation, you have CDs. And if you're in Scott and Chris's generation, you probably have MP3s. But either way, you have access to recordings. And I would suggest that you just sing out loud with those recordings. Put your favorite things on, whether it's the soundtrack to The Sound of Music, or the soundtrack of Hamilton, or English choirs, something by King's College, Cambridge, or St. John's, Cambridge choirs, and just sing along to the best of your ability. There are lots of recordings of hymns, and I know many of you who are not in choirs miss hymn singing, because hymn singing is something that builds you up. Well, you can find easily online recordings of hymns and just sing along with them, and play like you're in the shower and nobody can hear you. Just sing out. There are also archived videos with places who have the resources to do this, like the National Cathedral, and they have world-class choirs and organists there, as you do in your own parish, I want to point out. But you can watch those videos, and it can be tremendously upbuilding. And then YouTube videos. My favorite current group to listen to is a group from England called Voces 8. That's VOCES, and then the Arabic number 8. You can find dozens, maybe even hundreds of YouTube recordings by Voces 8, and they are simply magnificent. Sometimes you'll want to sing along, and sometimes you'll just want to stop and bathe in the luxury of singing like this.
And I want to talk a little bit about the recorded music, the kind of garage band and other kinds of music that people are putting together, because the process of doing it, we have done some, is nothing like making music when you're singing hymns or a chorus. It is nothing like that. If you haven't done it, you're singing along to some kind of either instrument or voice, and you put your part there, and then you record it, and then you submit it to somebody who pieces it all together and makes it beautiful. And depending on what the person has received, it's more beautiful than other times. But the experience of it, to hear your group singing, is really a wonderful thing. And we can recall, all of us who were around in Episcopal churches for Easter, when we were going through the lockdown, and we heard what I think was my first virtual choir singing "The Strife is O'er," and I thought, oh my God, it sounds beautiful, and there's 600 people singing, and I don't even much like "The Strife is O'er," but I know it was a beautiful thing, and I know that when I hear it again, or we're able to sing it again at a funeral or at Easter time next, it will be so moving, because it will have that memory. And it really was beautiful, though the process getting there is very, very different. So I would encourage folks to play around with those as much as possible.
I do want to ask you, though, did you feel like shouting out, "No, it's not," when you heard "The Strife is O'er"?
No.
Because the strife is not o'er. I also remember when we were thinking about Easter and what Easter was going to be like, I thought, oh my gosh, this could go on for several weeks.
Denial.
Exactly,
Right.
Denial, exactly right.
Well, and related to all of this is the anxiety of creating these virtual choirs. And people didn't become hymn singers or choral singers or music directors in order to become an audiovisual director and piece all these things together. So it takes certain courage. There's consulting, there's asking people, there's sometimes embarrassment about not knowing this stuff. And I say, for all of you who have been trained singers, no one has been trained for this stuff. Don't be embarrassed. it's like you don't know how to be a plumber either. I mean, this is totally different than what you have ever learned to do. So as you're putting this together, then give yourself a break and let yourself learn.
Being a plumber sounds easier.
It's much.
I mean, you don't deal with terms like synchronous singing and asynchronous singing and all that stuff. I didn't even know what those meant 2 years ago, and now, of course, we're dealing with.
Well, and having to hear yourself just out there with nobody around you, it can be a scary experience. It was for me.
So here's a word for introverts. Now, David and I are both extroverts off the charts, and so it drives us absolutely buggy to have to quarantine ourselves and sequester ourselves in our own homes. But I've heard many introverts say, this is pretty nice for me. I'm kind of liking this. I stay home and I read and I sleep and I do some work online if my work permits it. And introverts, you may need to push yourselves a little bit because even introverts need connection. Brene Brown says that we are neurologically wired for connection. And I think she's right. We are neurologically wired for connection.
And there are ways we might think outside of the box. We had a violinist from the Richmond Symphony come and play for our neighborhood association. We all brought our folding chairs and kept our social distance, and she did a 45-minute concert. But there may be singing opportunities like that in neighborhoods. And I know there are outdoor opportunities that, again, are very different. Do we do 15-minute speed singing opportunities somewhere outdoors, spaced apart? Or I don't know what, but just to begin thinking, if we're going to be in this for the long haul, what does it mean and how do we do this? And what can be done to feed this gap that's in our souls that is missing when we can't sing together? And are there some outdoor, large space kinds of opportunities that are available?
I heard somebody talking the other day about Christmas caroling, and I thought, oh no, please don't tell me we're going to be still at this at Christmas time. Dr. Fauci, please come on, find us a solution to this thing. We need to get over it. And I just want to say that we will get through this. We are going to get through this. Some of us won't live through it, but most of us are going to live through it. And we just have to believe that this will come to an end. And in the meantime, a regular spiritual practice will ground you like nothing else will. Daily prayer, meditation, Bible reading, even if that's something you have never tried, this might be the opportunity to do it.
I'm wondering, Scott, are we available for questions? And if maybe we can go back to gallery view, we can see everybody and they can wave their hands at us if they want to, or we'll just
on
keep
the right button here. Yep.
nattering on.
I think we are, and then I can let everybody unmute themselves. So let's see.
Oh, that's dangerous.
There it is. Yeah, now they can all talk. So I had one question.
Yes, I'm Bobby Spires. I'm not Episcopalian, but anyway, don't hold that against me. I did want to comment on a few things that were said. I'm scribe at Reveille United Methodist Church, in which I'm secretary treasurer, and due to the fact of what we're all experiencing, and I appreciate that you said something about meditation, prayer, etc., because I think an important part of me every week is to send cards out to people I don't even know. If we get a thank you, fine. If we don't, that's fine too. But during this epidemic, this is what I'm having to do. Also, for those of you, both of you, who are in the Richmond Chorus, when I was a 7th grader, I was under Edgar Schenkman, who was founder of the Richmond Symphony and also the Norfolk Symphony. So I'm dating myself now. Sorry about that.
Excellent.
We have a banner at home, and as Scott can tell you, I'm a musician, and so is my wife. This banner on our dueling piano says, "Music touches feelings that words cannot." It's the melody of, I can't read my own writing here. I was trying to get it. It's the melody uh, that's actually the food for all of us. And things that you can't do, you can do through music. And another comment I want to make, and then I'm going to get off because I know there are a lot of people on the YouTube. As you said, the virtual choirs are great. If you, I'm not a computer savvy. I have to have my oldest son who got married in Tucson, Arizona, incidentally. And he has to help me, and he's coming tomorrow. He doesn't know that he's going to have to help his poor father with a technical problem again. But there was a virtual choir that I saw, and actually it just really thrilled me at the beginning of this epidemic, this pandemic, of 500 countries singing together. And it just, I was just blown away. And with all of that, I'm getting out. And thank you for letting a Methodist refugee come aboard to both of you.
Well, I'm a Methodist refugee too. My dad was a Methodist minister in the Virginia Conference and jumped ship in 1982 and became an Episcopalian.
Oh, yes. And before I leave, Edgar Potts IV was a soloist with the Richmond Chorus for years. Good friend of mine.
Yes, yes.
Nice. Scott, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking of certain things. For instance, this series has come about as a result of the pandemic, because before all of this, none of us were on sort of a platform like Zoom that could make this type of thing possible for us to participate and have interaction. I mean, sure, we could do videos before, but we couldn't do things that let us go back and forth like this. And I think in some ways I don't feel like this has replaced something else. I think this is something new. And the other thing it's enabled us to do is, like a few weeks ago, we talked with Michael Boney from Denver, and we're able to bring them into this. And I think one of the things that I'm wondering is that in some ways the isolation has brought us closer because the world has gotten smaller because of technology. And do you think that this applies, is something that maybe speaks to us further on than just through the pandemic?
I think that we are going to be looking back on this time and remarking at the things that we have learned that have come out of this virus. Even computer techniques that we want to continue using that we didn't use before this virus. Problems that we share usually do that, don't they? They give us opportunities to find solutions that carry us into a better place. And I'm quite sure that we're going to be doing things differently after this virus is over.
And I said that part of my denial in March was that my retreat that was scheduled at a local Episcopal church in May was going to continue just fine, that in April we were going to have this all licked. And of course we can march ahead with the retreat. Well, in April, fortunately, I was able to reconfigure that and made it into a Zoom retreat. And it lasted 3 hours on Zoom. And the advantage was that instead of local folks from Richmond having the opportunity, only people from Richmond come, there were people from Alexandria and California and different places throughout Virginia, different parishes. And so people had a chance to participate. There, Bobby, there were even some Methodists there. And it was an opportunity to expand and have people there. And the breakout groups worked beautifully and in ways that were surprising. And so instead of going off into little rooms in a church, we had little breakout rooms, and it actually worked. So there were all sorts of ways that it worked well. And I was so relieved because that's so much a part of what I want to do in life. So I think there will be lots of opportunities for that.
I had the opportunity to talk about my ancestor, the Reverend Devereux Jarrett, who was an Episcopal priest during colonial times. in Saponi Episcopal Church in Dinwiddie County in McKinney. And it was very interesting to see how I was related to this great individual. So the Episcopalians, yes.
Anyone else have something to say?
Well, and Ken, I mentioned on the chat room that certainly churches that are already live streaming can certainly add that to their repertoire, or it may be that they've gotten that up and running, and through the experience of this makes it more available for people by live streaming all the time. And it might just be another part of the repertoire of a particular church if they have that ability now.
What else needs to be said? Well, if there's nothing, Chris and Scott, shall I close with a prayer?
Well, I wanted to read a little psalm here.
Oh, all right.
If that's all right.
Go ahead.
Go right ahead.
I would encourage you to look at Psalm 91, and I'm just going to read a part of it. And somehow it shows up in the prayer book an awful lot. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High abides under the shadow of the Almighty. He shall say to the Lord, you are my refuge and my stronghold, in God in whom I put my trust. God shall deliver you from the snare of the hunter and from the deadly pestilence. God shall cover you with his pinions, and you shall find refuge under God's wings. His faithfulness shall be a shield and buckler. You shall not be afraid of any terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, of the plague that stalks in the darkness, nor of the sickness that lays waste at midday. 1,000 shall fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. Your eyes have only to behold to see the reward of the wicked, because you have made the Lord your refuge and the Most High your habitation. There shall no evil happen to you, neither shall any plague come near your dwelling.
Let's pray together. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. O God, you are the source of our strength, the ground of our being. Look with mercy on us, your servants, in this time of COVID-19. Give us health, give us wisdom, give us courage. Show us how to fill our days with actions that build up ourselves and our spiritual siblings. In your grace and loving kindness, bring this virus to an end quickly. Bless scientists and medical personnel as they search for cures and vaccines and treat those who are suffering. Help us to see light in your light. Through your blessed Son, Jesus, and your Holy Spirit, Holy Trinity, one God. Amen.
Amen.
Blessings, everyone.
Great seeing
Thank you all for coming. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both. And thank you, Scott, for letting me in.
Oh, yeah,
Yay.
absolutely. We'll keep you all posted when we come up with the next thing we're doing. So stay tuned.
All right. Thanks, Scott and Chris.
Everyone have a good evening.